Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit, what are your experiences? Funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia? NSFW. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work. So I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. I'm anesthesia. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up and the first thing he asked was, do I still have my balls? And I told him yep, both of them, and he said both? Oh, you guys are great. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed, hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, you're snoring, roll over. And I rolled right onto the gurney. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off. And sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they are under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole or erupted in laughter. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends. This is the guy. Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpsman's ass and hung on for dear life. The woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR grabbed a girl's ass in the OR, got named Assman by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit, my top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my good on drugs. Wonderful. Additional edit, thank you for the gold. Now I just have to figure out what to do with it. Can I redeem it for Bitcoin? Trade it for beer, perhaps? Nurse here. This really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male BTW. A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, if I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big D. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, you're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife? Yes, he was propositioning a 3-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk? The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. Not a hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a Nazi POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her now." She always came back with another male nurse after that. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my balls. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin. Then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "AWW mum, they've shaved my pubes. I'm no happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's no right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. He grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred. "My name is Worcestershire sauce." "No, wait. That's not a cool name. My name is Shark." I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery. I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse. Ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm. So I hadn't been on a ward etc prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once. And I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. Not the doctor or the nurse. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7. I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me: "Why are the Rugrats on?" "Doctor, you woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." Me: "Why did I want to be angry?" "Doctor, you said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." Edit. Obligatory wow. One of my most upvoted comments is about my early life angst. Only behind my 5-word comment that referenced a trebuchet. Reddit works in mysterious ways. Tie. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked. The nurse explained that he destroyed it restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. 2 stories. 1. I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she just totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now." and she mouthed okay, and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2. I was in helping with a heart procedure and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like press sorry for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. I shadowed a surgery once with this guy who woke up saying, "Give it to me straight, doc. Will I ever play the piano again?" All of us were cracking up and he then goes, "Oh, wait, I don't know how to play the piano." Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his D in my mouth." It was awkward. I'm not a doctor nurse, but I heard about this after my wisdom teeth surgery. I apparently was still on anesthesia, and when they wheeled me out I had both arms stuck out and was making plane noises. They asked me what I was doing and I told them I was becoming my final form of a plane. Still do not know why I was doing it. Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash. Pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months. He had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about, he did not believe us. So he asked her and she confirmed it. Said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled "they're right here" and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued. My wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a duck in sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Were they missy?" when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no and I passed out halfway OC through my response of all. 2. Still very out of it. Getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face. To which I respond, "It's cool. I got this. Get back in the bed. Hit the call button and say I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later a nurse comes flying into the room. Looks, says "Holy crap. Be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I had my wisdom teeth removed about a month ago and apparently when I woke up I said, "Wowie, that's some good it." Once I woke up asking if the ends justify the means. Once I went under while reminding all the women in the room that the room is very cold and they shouldn't judge. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth thief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. After waking up from my wisdom tooth surgery, I remember asking my mom I didn't fart. Did I? I had a bunch of gas before the surgery and now it's gone. I hope I didn't fart in front of the cute nurse. Cute nurse is behind me during the whole speech. Welp. Came out of anesthetic and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the ass." And I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure. It was a nose operation." The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse not so amused. Not a doctor or nurse. When my sister was 16, she had back surgery to repair a ruptured disc in her lower back. Apparently, the meds that they gave her before she was put under gave her low enough inhibitions that instead of counting backward from 10, she started belting out the lyrics to Roxanne. The staff later told my mom that not only were they amazed that someone that young knew the lyrics, that the way that she started singing was one of the funniest things they had seen in an hour. 3 times. The first time when I was 5. Tonsil surgery. My family is from Norway, and my grandmother always kept a pewter model of a longboat on her mantle, just to explain why a 5-year-old would wake up screaming, "Get me back to the longboat," and then apparently, to quote my mother, go all Linda Blair on the doctors when they came in to try to give me antibiotics. That was nearly 25 years ago and my family still likes to joke about me managing to shriek my head off and throw punches after having just come out of throat surgery. By age 13, I tamed down some, and apparently only muttered angrily at everyone while waking up. Age 26, all the fight had gone out of me, and I just cried whenever a nurse asked me a question. "How is your pain?" "Not bad." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Can you sit up for me?" Uncontrollable sobbing. "Okay then, let's get you some apple juice." Fully disconsolate. Edit because I can't count. Friend of mine woke up and asked all the nurses to smoke a bowl with him. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming my balls hurt. The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said my balls hurt. He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." The only thing I could think of as the patient was that I surprised a lot of nurses with how quickly I shook off the anesthetic. I would be walking around an hour later and getting changed ready to go home. They just looked dumbfounded. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist I was gone and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid and I started yelling the Qui-I the last snake. Apparently I almost caused my mom to crash the car and it quickly became annoying very fast as one could imagine. I woke up from knee surgery and demanded a vodka and coke with no ice. Also for some reason when I woke up I was freezing cold and shivering. One of the nurses hooked me up to some heater which blew warm air under the covers from the bottom of the bed. I then likened myself to Marilyn Monroe. I'm a 6'2" athletic guy. Got told the story. When I was 8, I got a knee surgery. While on anesthesia, the travel between my hospital room and the OR tough I was in a Formula 1 car, so I would make all the noise, telling people to faster, make the sound of the tires too. The guys told my mom it was the funniest transfer they ever had. Everybody was laughing including people in the hallway. I'm not a medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the duck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room. But after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too. A bunch of family and everyone from the office and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing I can think is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gawked him finally worked its way out of his system. 2011 I had a hernia surgery. Don't remember this but was told I woke up exclaiming how f***ed up I was. Wanted to know what they had given me and if I could purchase some. My 11-year-old daughter woke up crying after foot surgery because she felt bad for Luigi. When I asked her why, she said because no one ever wants to be him when they play. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was fine gran. I'm high as giraffe balls. I was coming around from surgery and the nurse who was looking after me had a crush on a guy I dated when I first started nursing, several years before. It was rather surreal to go from deep sleep to talking about an ex-boyfriend I had hardly thought about in years. I almost feel it was an abuse of her power. I could have said anything coming out. You don't expect to be interrogated about a past relationship the first thing waking up from major surgery. In the end I found out some gossip. The relationship didn't last long and apparently he was hurt that I wasn't devastated when we broke up and that I started dating someone new within a few weeks. Was the patient in this one? When I was 12 I had heart surgery and was getting wheeled down to the operating room. I was completely transfixed on my knee when I then asked a nurse if I could pet the kitty. She said sure, so I started petting and scratching my knee going AWW, good kitty kitty. When I woke up from that surgery I spent about 5 days in anesthetic hell, like a medically induced coma but not quite as severe, and cussed out every nurse that asked me how I was doing. I was intubated so I had to scratch out my hatred onto scrap paper and hope they could translate it. When I was off of the cocktail they were giving me I was back to my cheerful self and felt mortified about calling the pretty nurses working the ICU ward at Children's Hospital a bunch of stupid cunts. Apparently it happens all the time but I still cringe when I think about it. Slightly different in that it wasn't anesthesia, but rather sedative meds. I worked in a hospital years ago and once had a patient who had an extreme paradoxical reaction, opposite of what is expected, to her Ambien. She went off the rails. She started hallucinating that she was in a hostage situation with a man who was killing babies. One nurse went in the middle of the night while doing her rounds and the patient attacked her with a folded wire hanger and severely beat her in the face and head. The nurse ended up with multiple broken bones in her face, blacked both eyes, and a number of deep wounds on her face. She was gone for a while on workman's comp but eventually quit, stating the experience had traumatized her and she didn't want to be in the building again. Don't know whatever happened to the patient but I doubt she would have been punished or charged, since she was not in her right state of mind and nobody expected such a reaction to the medicine. Not me. A male friend broke his nose, which was a bit off to begin with, and asked the doctor to not give him a cosmetic operation, only functional since he couldn't breathe well. Before the operation, a nurse had him stripped to put the operation robe on. While high on anesthesia, he proceeds to brag about his D and tell the nurse how hot she is, to which she only laughs. Operation goes well. The doctor, however, once he cut the nose bridge or whatever and placed the nose in its new place, thought the cosmetic one looked too good to not be done. So he did it anyways. Friend wakes up, sees his nose in a mirror pointing upwards, starts to get real angry, almost punching the mirror, until the hot nurse came in. Next words were, "Hee how you like my new sexier nose?" There was another male nurse on the room. After trying to hit on the female nurse, patient said to him, "Hey, I'm really hungry. Come bring us a pizza and I'll pay you later." Guys game even while high. Added last part about the pizza. My brother had knee surgery done, and at the time was running his own business and was stressed out. When he was coming off the anesthesia he was trying to get out of bed and demanding to let him go because he had to get back to work. It took 3 nurses to hold him down to convince him to stay in bed. The sad and funny thing is, he remembered the whole thing, but he said it was like he felt he couldn't stop himself. Needless to say he was really embarrassed the rest of his hospital stay.